Despite their alliance in World War I, Anglo-American relations were frosty during the interwar period. This tension stemmed from Britain's $22 billion debt to the United States and its status as the global naval superpower and main economic competitor to America. During this time, the US developed several color-coded war plans to address hypothetical conflict scenarios. Among these, War Plan Red outlined strategies for a potential war between the US and Great Britain. Such a conflict would likely escalate into a continental war, primarily fought in North America between the US and then British Dominion of Canada, prompting American military planners to devise a strategy for invading and conquering Canada. In this video, we will discuss these hypothetical war plans for an American invasion of Canada, discussing a chilling alternate timeline which thankfully never came to pass. Every week, we release 3 new exclusive videos for our members and patrons. The Pacific War, the Eastern Front of World War II Prelude, and many other series, including the War of Spanish Succession, Punic Wars, Iberian Reconquista, Russian Revolution and Civil War, North African and Italian campaigns of World War II, and much more. It has been long overdue, but we have finally created a YouTube channel exclusively for our Kings and Generals podcasts. Please go and check out Kings and Generals podcast, home to the Pacific War Week by Week podcast and the Fall and Rise of China podcast, link in the description and pinned comment. To see those, as well as get access to our exclusive Discord, see our schedule, and get early access to all videos, join the ranks of our patrons and YouTube members via the links in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to our supporters for allowing us to continue doing our dream job. During the interwar period, the United States Armed Forces developed a number of color-coded war plans to meet hypothetical war scenarios. War Plan Black prepared for war with Germany, while War Plan Grey focused on Central America and the Azores. Other plans included Brown for uprisings in the then US-occupied Philippines, Tan for Cuba, and Red for the British Empire. War Plan Orange targeted Japan, accommodating a potential two-front conflict codenamed Red-Orange. Additional plans addressed War Plan Yellow for China, War Plan Green for Mexico, War Plan Indigo for Iceland, War Plan Purple for South America, and War Plan White for domestic uprisings within the United States. War Plan Red was a strategy for conflict with the United Kingdom, with a sub-plan designated Crimson, focused on a potential conflict with Canada. There were also other sub-variants for each British Dominion, such as Ruby for India, Scarlet for Australia, Garnet for New Zealand, Emerald for Ireland, and Pink for all other colonial possessions. At the onset of the Second World War, all colour-coded plans were officially withdrawn, but kept secretly in reserve and replaced by the 5 Rainbow Plans. American war planners believed that conflict with Great Britain would likely stem from interference in foreign trade relations or routes. Britain enforced belligerent rights during wartime, allowing it to disrupt trade with enemy nations. In World War I, this meant blockading Germany and obstructing other nations' trade with Germany, leading to property confiscations and minor conflicts. Thus, if the US traded with a nation at war with Britain, a violent conflict could arise. Given both nations' performance during World War I, American planners anticipated a lengthy conflict fought primarily in North America. They hoped Canada would side with Britain, as this would allow the United States to occupy the country. However, if Canada claimed neutrality, then the US would insist on occupying key ports, like Halifax, and other strategic areas until the war concluded. The US Army began the development of War Plan Red after the 1927 Geneva Naval Conference. It was approved in May of 1930 by the Secretary of War and the Secretary of Navy. In 1934, it was amended to authorize the immediate first use of poison gas and the use of strategic bombing to capture or destroy Halifax, which was deemed a critical target. In February 1935, the US War Department secured $57 million for 3 border air bases to launch preemptive strikes on Canadian airfields, with one base camouflaged as a civilian airport. In August 1935, the US conducted its largest peacetime military maneuver, deploying 36,000 troops near the Canadian border south of Ottawa, with another 15,000 held in reserve in Pennsylvania, simulating an American motorized invasion of Canada. The final version of the plan was submitted on December 18, 1935, by the US Army War College's G2 Intelligence Division. The war plan assumed that Britain would initially gain the advantage due to her superior Royal Navy, using Canada as a base for an invasion of the United States. The primary objective of the United Kingdom in this scenario was assumed to be the elimination of the United States as a significant economic rival. The war was expected to be prolonged, with anticipated reinforcements from the rest of the British Empire. There was also the possibility of Japan or Mexico intervening on Britain's behalf, but by the mid-1930s, intervention from non-Commonwealth forces appeared unlikely. To counter these threats, the United States would initially refrain from engaging outside the Western Hemisphere or confronting the Royal Navy in a decisive battle. Instead, the strategy focused on defending against a British-Canadian invasion while blockading, invading, and ultimately conquering Canada. Blue aimed to capture key ports, air bases, railways, and strategic territories to deny the enemy vital resources. North America would be fortified as a defensive stronghold to prevent Britain from establishing a foothold for invasion. The hope was that conquering Crimson and economically strangling Red would lead to a negotiated peace. In this scenario, US outposts in the Philippines, Guam, and American Samoa would be left to defend against British or Anzac attacks during the conflict's early stages. After extensive war games at the Naval War College, War Plan Red planners decided against attacking British shipping or engaging in a decisive naval battle. The US Navy would focus on the western North Atlantic to block British-Canadian traffic. Following the conquest of Crimson, if an opportunity arose, the US Navy would engage the Royal Navy. A successful engagement would allow the United States to disrupt British supply lines and invade colonies in the Western Hemisphere. All territory captured from Britain or Canada would be annexed by Blue and incorporated into US states or territories if victorious. However, if Britain won, the United States would likely cease to be a commercial or military rival, with the British Empire annexing Alaska. The G2 Intelligence Division conducted extensive reconnaissance of Canada, examining its geography, resources, and military. Notably, the famous American pilot Charles Lindbergh undertook secret reconnaissance flights over Canadian airspace up to Hudson Bay to identify strategic locations. He was among the first to suggest using poison gas in the event of conflict. Canada's main political subdivisions included the Maritime Provinces, Quebec, Ontario, the Prairie Provinces, and British Columbia. Although not a part of Canada before 1949, Newfoundland was also considered for Crimson's war efforts. A census on June 1, 1931, reported Crimson's total population at 10,376,786, with 5,374,541 males, concentrated along a narrow strip south of the 56th parallel, west of Lake Winnipeg, and south of the 49th parallel, east of Lake Superior. The climate in southern Canada was found to be similar to that of northern US regions. Due to brutal winter conditions, war planners recommended avoiding extensive military operations in Canada from November 1st to April 15th. In 1934, G2 Intelligence estimated that the Canadian Army had 3,760 permanent and 135,184 non-permanent personnel. It was anticipated that 60,000 men could be mustered within 15 days of conflict, increasing to 126,000 after 30 days. After 180 days, Britain could begin contributing 50,000 a month. The Royal Canadian Navy comprised 104 officers and 812 personnel, with possible support from the Royal British Navy adding 113 officers and 1,026 men. The fleet included 4 destroyers and 3 minesweepers. The Royal Canadian Air Force possessed 1,055 personnel, 84 combat aircraft, 189 total aircraft, and an additional 20 on order. Following World War I, the US Army had downsized to 135,000 active duty personnel, but could mobilize over 4 million in wartime. The US Navy included 100,000 active duty personnel, and by 1935 boasted 15 battleships, 4 aircraft carriers, 25 cruisers, 104 destroyers, 52 submarines, and hundreds of other vessels, totaling 320 warships. By 1932, the Army Air Corps comprised 1,305 officers, 13,400 enlisted men, and 1,709 aircraft. G2 Intelligence estimated that Great Britain could deploy 2.5 million troops to Canada from its colonial empire. During this time, the Royal Navy was regarded as the world's strongest navy, easily outmatching the US Navy. It boasted 20 battleships and battle cruisers, 12 aircraft carriers, 90 cruisers, 100 destroyers, 70 submarines, and hundreds of other warships, along with 232 naval aircraft. The Royal Air Force had 48 squadrons of 12 aircraft each ready to land in Canada, with continuous shipments projected to increase that number to over 74 squadrons within 120 days of conflict. It was evident that Canada could not successfully defend its territory against the United States. Canada would probably concentrate on defending Halifax and the Montreal-Quebec line to hold bases of operation for the United Kingdom. Her secondary priority would be safeguarding key supply routes and industrial areas. In August 1935, the US conducted its largest peacetime military maneuver, mobilizing 36,000 troops near the Canadian border south of Ottawa, with 15,000 more in reserve in Pennsylvania. The scenario favored an American motorized invasion of Canada as the ideal strategy. War Plan Red's success depended first and foremost on the capture of the port city of Halifax, the greatest ice-free port of eastern Canada. It was certain that the United Kingdom would use Halifax as its main naval base of operations, and its capture could prevent the United Kingdom from providing Canada with troops and supplies. Because of its importance, the US authorized the use of poison gas and strategic bombing to ensure the rapid capture of Halifax. Second to Halifax was the hydroelectric power plant at Niagara Falls, as it supplied most of the region's power. Taking it would severely cripple Crimson's operations. Following the completion of these objectives, the plan called for a full-scale invasion on 3 fronts, advancing from Vermont to the Montreal-Quebec area, from North Dakota to seize the Winnipeg railhead, and from the Midwest to capture key nickel mines in Ontario. Meanwhile, the US Navy aimed to secure the Great Lakes and establish a blockade of Canadian Atlantic and Pacific ports. For the invasion of the maritime region, the United States would launch an amphibious assault on Halifax from Boston and New York. Anticipating heavy fortifications, a failed frontal assault would lead to landings at St. Margaret's Bay to besiege Halifax. If conditions were unfavorable there, the United States would advance overland from eastern Maine. Upon capturing Halifax, her undersea cables would be severed to disconnect Canada from Britain. Meanwhile, the US Armed Forces would capture the ports of St. John and Moncton, essential airfields and railway junctions. In the St. Lawrence River area, the Americans would advance via roads and railways from New York, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine to seize Montreal and Quebec. Capturing these 4-month icebound ports would cut off the rest of Canada from the eastern seaboard, halting the movement of supplies and troops, and denying Crimson and Red access to eastern Canada's industrial and agricultural centres and air bases. For the invasion of the Great Lakes region, the United States would launch simultaneous advances from Buffalo into Niagara via the Peace Bridge, from Detroit into Windsor via the Ambassador Bridge, and from Pennsylvania into Sudbury. After capturing Niagara Falls, America would secure the Sioux Locks and all key bridges over the Niagara River and Welland Canal, establishing a significant bridgehead in Canada for further operations. These actions would not only facilitate the invasion, but also cripple Canada's industry by disrupting transportation of iron ore, grain, and coal. To invade the Winnipeg area, America would advance from North Dakota through Grand Forks to seize the Transcontinental Railway's nerve center. Capturing this point would effectively split eastern and western Canada, disrupting the transport of troops and essential supplies such as coal, grain, meat, and oil to the east. For the invasion of the Vancouver-Victoria area, the US would advance from Bellingham via Route 99 into British Columbia and launch an amphibious assault on Vancouver Island from Port Angeles. They would capture Prince Rupert, its railway, and the naval base at Esquimalt, denying the United Kingdom a foothold in Western Canada. To further weaken Britain, the United States planned to incite revolts for home rule in Ireland and British India, while employing submarine warfare against Britain's commerce. Additionally, Blue aimed to cut off Red's trade routes in the Asiatic, Hawaiian, Panama Canal, and Alaskan theaters, eliminating Red as a strong competitor in foreign trade. During the interwar years, Great Britain did not create a formal war plan against the United States. However, Royal Navy officers believed that if war broke out, their main objective would be to transport troops and supplies to Canada to defend against a US invasion. They considered invading the US unrealistic and a naval blockade too challenging. Instead, the Royal Navy would attack the US fleet from bases like Bermuda while disrupting US shipping and safeguarding British interests. The plan included bombarding US coastal targets, conducting amphibious raids, and, with Dominion forces, capturing the Philippines and other US territories, ultimately hoping to compel the US to seek peace. Unlike Great Britain, Canada created a war plan against the US. Brigadier General James Buster Sutherland Brown from the Canadian Department of Military Organization and Intelligence developed 4 defensive contingency plans called Defence Schemes No. 1 to 4, all of which relied on British intervention. The most ambitious, Defence Scheme No. 1, was initiated on April 12, 1921, and operated on the premise that the best defence is a good offence. Should conflict arise, Canada planned a surprise 5-pronged attack into the northern US, anticipating that the US would first invade Montreal and Ottawa, followed by Hamilton, Toronto, the Prairies, and British Columbia. To counter this, the Canadian forces would quickly occupy Seattle, Spokane, and Portland from the Pacific Command, while Prairie Command troops attacked Fargo, Great Falls, and Minneapolis. Quebec forces would target Albany, and maritime troops would invade Maine. Meanwhile, remaining Canadian forces would retreat to defensive lines, destroying key bridges and railways to impede US advances. The incursion aimed to hold these positions temporarily to draw away US forces from Canadian defences, allowing time for British reinforcements. However, Brown's plan was fundamentally flawed due to his negligence in defending the port of Halifax. Major General Andrew G.L. McNaughton, the Chief of the Canadian General Staff, discontinued Defence Scheme No. 1 in 1929. War Plan Red was declassified in 1974 and can be viewed to this day in the Library of Congress. Ultimately, the colour-coded war plans were officially withdrawn in 1939 with the outbreak of World War II, giving way to the 5 Rainbow Plans, designed to address the challenges of a 2-ocean war against multiple enemies. However, they were all secretly retained, and most of their contents were incorporated into future US war plans. Notably, War Plan Orange 3 was incorporated into Rainbow Plan 5 and nearly implemented to a T during the defense of the Philippines. Additionally, War Plan Red Orange, originally envisioned as a war against the Anglo-Japanese alliance, would be amended during the outbreak of World War II, replacing Great Britain with Germany and Italy. More videos like this are on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing, it helps immensely. Our patrons and YouTube members can watch more than 200 exclusive videos. Join their ranks via the link in the description or by pressing the join button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.